Hello and welcome to the DTOS News Desk. The Finance Act 2022-23 was voted on the 2nd of August following the budget bill. And the budget is based on three main themes: strengthening economic growth and resilience to future shocks, accelerating our transition to sustainable and inclusive development, and investing in our people. And with us today is Medina Tourabli from Prism Chambers. Her practice focuses mainly on tax controversy matters and advice. And from DTOS, we have Didier Vani, who's the head of international operations and outsourcing services. Right, let's talk about corporate and legal tax. Medina, Mauritius is going to introduce a domestic minimum top-up tax of 15% for resident companies of larger multinationals. Is it the beginning of the end of tax treaties?
Thank you for having me, Mark, today. I think before we can answer this question, it's good to have a brief overview of the aim to understand where this imposition comes from.
Right.
So basically, the imposition of a minimum top-up tax originates from the OECD Pillar 2 initiatives, whereby the main aim is to ensure that large multinationals pay the appropriate income tax rate. And with this comes the consequence that there's a taxation model intended to apply to large multinational enterprises having at least a revenue of 750 million euros to pay an income tax arising from the jurisdiction on which they operate and generate profits. So Mauritius, as part of 136 countries, is accepted to implement this approach of the OECD, and this is how this has come into action into the new Finance Act recently passed. So what does this actually mean for tax treaties? That's a very valid question, and one that's being asked by a lot of international financial centers. So from what we can see from the Finance Act, the rule only seeks to apply to large multinationals having at least 750 million euros as revenue. This is quite a high threshold and does not seem to apply to most of the taxpayers in Mauritius. So in the short term, we can assume that there will be a limited impact on international financial centers. Okay. Secondly, the provision is not yet enforced, so it's difficult to gauge how it will apply for now, and we will have to wait for the passing of the regulations to know how it will apply in practice. Additionally, what this means is that a minimum top-up tax and tax treaties are not mutually exclusive. The main aim of tax treaties is to promote trade and avoid double taxation. Tax treaties will still be crucial in the application of cross-border investments, such as determining whether a country has permanent establishment, the determination of residence, how it applies to individuals, or solving cross-border tax disputes. So these will always remain relevant. And the imposition of the minimum top-up tax does not mean that a multinational will be taxed twice. Having said that, I think that as the world moves to a more level playing field in terms of tax competition, it will be difficult for us as an international financial center to sort of play a tax card now to promote cross-border investment in Mauritius.
Okay, right, so let's get into tax holidays. How is it going to be a game changer in these challenging times?
The Finance Act has recently introduced 8-year tax holidays to certain businesses. So for sustainable agricultural practices registered with the EDB and for innovative agricultural methods under the Integrated Modern Agricultural Scheme. So I think it's important to note that those measures form part of a broader greener vision to encourage sustainability and self-sufficiency post-pandemic. And this comes to add to a host of other tax holidays that are already enforced in Mauritius. Whether they actually work or the amount of investment that they actually attract is still to be determined. I think that tax holidays work best when there are other incentives to encourage people for the investment. I think the jury is still out on this one, and it will take a few years before we can finally say what the proper impact of those tax holidays are.
Didier, for people living and working in Mauritius, has the amount of tax we'll be paying changed?
Look, in fact, one of the main changes in that budget, in that Finance Act, is the introduction of a new tax band, which is going to be taxed at 12.5%. But unexpectedly, this tax band is not progressive. and might create some anomalies, because some people earning more, a little bit more than 700,000 rupees per annum, might be taking home a bit less than those earning the lower band. So there's definitely an issue there. The second thing that has been a bit of a surprise is the solidarity levy. It's still there. And it was meant to be a temporary initiative or measure in the economic aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's still there, and it's really removing the attractiveness of Mauritius as a tax-friendly jurisdiction. So we hope that those two things will be rectified soon.
Didier, so it seems that the government is offloading pain points through the introduction of various schemes. Could you perhaps unpack that for us?
Indeed. It's been introduced in this Finance Act that the reintroduction of the Tax Area Settlement Scheme, TASS, and the expedition of matters at the ARC level. It's definitely a laudable initiative, but we believe it's a bit restrictive and the window is not wide enough. What do you think, Medina?
I completely agree with what you say. The tax area scheme is welcome and will help lessen the burden of the ARC, with taxpayers being able to sort of settle on the payment only of pure tax instead of having the waiver of penalties and interest. But it is quite a short time frame, yeah, but we'll see how it goes.
What about non-resident employers who have employees working remotely from Mauritius? Do they have to pay tax?
No, they wouldn't have to pay taxes. Mark, I think this one was really an important clarity, because it brings clarity both to the employer and the employee.
Yes.
For the employer, it gives clarity that they will not be considered as what we call a permanent establishment and not subject to Mauritian tax laws and not be resident to the local laws on the island. So that's very welcome. For the employee as well, a lot of people were coming under the premium visa, and there was some kind of a gray area about whether they would be taxed in Mauritius and subject to the famous or infamous solidarity levy.
Yeah.
So I think this brings clarity. What do you think?
I think this brings a lot of clarity, and especially after the bill has been amended. There was a previous inconsistency in the wording of the provision. So I think that now that this has been rectified, it provides a lot more clarity to those who seek to work from Mauritius and what this implies for them tax-wise.
Right, so that's a wrap up from us at the DTOS News Desk. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you'd like to know more information about all these topics that we get into, please go and follow us on social media on LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram, and we'll see you next time.